Closing costs unpacked. What buyers and sellers in Kentucky need to know. Hi, everybody. This is David Hittle, your real estate specialist with United Real Estate Louisville. And in real estate, it is not just the sale price that matters. Closing costs can surprise buyers and sellers alike. So today we are unpacking closing costs state by state and drilling in on what that means if you are buying or selling in Kentucky. Let's demystify who pays what the typical percentages are, and what you should expect when it is your turn at the closing table. But first, what are closing costs? Well, closing costs are all the fees, taxes, and administrative charges that are tied to finalizing a real estate transaction. These costs include things like title search and title insurance, appraisal and inspection fees, recording and deed transfer fees, lender or mortgage origination fees, attorney or escrow fees, prepaid insurance, property taxes, and escrow reserves. But remember, every state has its own rules and typical amounts. Some costs are fixed. Some costs are negotiable. Some costs vary county to county. The national average, depending of course on how you count fees, can run anywhere from 3 to 6% of the home's value. But in many states, closing costs are much lower, depending of course on local taxes, fees, and regulation. That's exactly why a state-by-state breakdown matters. So what do closing costs look like in Kentucky? Let's zero in on data from Kentucky and see what it shows. On average, closing costs in Kentucky, excluding real estate commissions, are about 1.4% of the home's sale price for many transactions. Some sources expand that range to 2 to 5%, depending, of course, on the loan type, the county the property is purchased, and other added fees. For sellers in Kentucky, average closing costs tend to be around 3% of the sale price, and those fees cover transfer taxes, recording fees, and title and escrow services. To put this in perspective, if you sold a home for $300,000, typical seller closing costs could be around 9%. For a buyer, being quoted 1.4% would mean about $4,200 in closing costs, though that can shift depending on county, loan structure, and who pays what. Also worth noting is Kentucky requires attorney or title professionals to facilitate residential closings, which adds to the legal or administrative overhead. Now let's break down who typically pays which closing costs in Kentucky. Sellers usually cover transfer taxes, prorated property taxes, title and recording services, and some administrative and escrow costs, while buyers pay many of the mortgage-related fees such as origination, underwriting, appraisal, credit checks, etc. They also cover title insurance in many cases, recording and escrow reserves. Often costs are negotiable. For example, a buyer may request closing cost credits from the seller, but the leverage to do that depends on market conditions. In Kentucky, it's common for both sides to share in certain fees. It is not unusual for sellers to shoulder more when a buyer is locked into a tighter budget. So when you see closing costs, always ask which costs, who's responsible, and what is negotiable. Here are some tips to manage and reduce closing costs in Kentucky. If you are entering a transaction in Kentucky, here are some strategies to control your closing costs. Number one, compare lenders and loan offers. Origination fees, underwriting fees, and points can vary. Number two, ask for seller's concessions. In some deals, the seller can agree to cover part or all of the buyer's closing costs. Number three, shop title service providers. Not all title and escrow services charge the same for searches, insurance, or document preparation. Four, negotiate non-mandatory items. Some fees, such as home warranties, settlement, conveniences, etc., may be optional. Number five, know your county specific fees. Local recording, transfer, or tax rates can vary, and that makes a difference in your final tab. Planning ahead and budgeting for 1.5% to 3% for many Kentucky transactions gives you a more realistic cushion than hoping closing costs will be minimal. So here's the bottom line. Closing costs are not a surprise if you understand the breakdown, especially in Kentucky. They vary by state, by loan, and by county. But in Kentucky, you are often looking at 1.4% for buyers on a clean transaction and about 3% for sellers after including all necessary fees. If you'd like, I can run closing cost estimates for Louisville or Jefferson County based on a few price points so that you know exactly what to budget, whether you are buying or selling here. I am David Hittle, your real estate specialist with United Real Estate Louisville, and I believe the more you see what's under the hood, the better move you can make. Let's always close with confidence.